good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning, and my apologies for the slight delay. I'd like to call to order the Thursday, July 30, 2026 School Board Workshop at this time. And as we do, we'll go ahead and get right into it. And I'd like to introduce Vice Chair Atkinson to go through the agenda.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
First item on the agenda is the student progression plan, and I'd like to call up Mr. Bob Bedford.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, so we are submitting the student progression plan again in its annual review and yearly review. We've made some modifications, some which were statutorily needed to be done. I included in the school board minutes the changes. Page 1 was all statute changes. There wasn't anything that really stood out this year, just some language being tidied up from the state's end, so then we wanted to tidy it up in the student progression plan. The back page is where we made some district changes to the student progression plan. If you'd like me to, I can go through those and why we made those changes. So the first one being the middle school semester exams removed. So we looked at this, we did research around the different districts on how they treat midterms and finals. We found a lot of districts did away with it after COVID, and looked at it more from the view of if a student goes through 18 weeks of getting certain grades, and then we put 30% of a grade that's going to be on that student from that 18 weeks. It became high stakes testing at that point for the students. The other thing that is really the reason that we looked at it is we're going to gain back instructional days within the classroom. So that leading up to that Christmas break where during December we're going to have progress monitoring 2 go on, then we would go right into, at the high school and the middle school level, we'd go right into midterms and finals. We'd run them over 4 days. So that was really 4 days of non-instruct time, to be honest with you. And so at the middle school level, we met with all secondary, to be honest with you. So we met with high school and middle school. The high schools wanted to preserve it at least for 1 more year because it has some implications on attendance. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this year and we're going to study what other ways can we affect attendance like we have with the waiver exam that we brought in 2 years ago. Because again, we'd like to capture those days at the high school level as well. But we said, okay, let's take a year to kind of brainstorm around what we can still do to impact attendance and the importance of attendance. But we'll start at the middle school. All the middle school principals were on board with changing it. So we made that change at the middle school level, and it would be our expectation that they're going right up to that last day before that Christmas break.
So will progress monitoring be pushed back to closer to the break time versus, because I know we would do it kind of like mid-December, and then have time for review before.
Yeah, so within the windows, we let the schools decide, but we do want to capture more of a look, right? So if we're not going into January, which a lot of school districts still go into January, we're going to do it in December, we'll push that back. And then obviously when you get to the finals, it's the biggest impact because that's your PM3. So we're going to push that to the very, so a lot of our conversations around testing this year is what are the latest dates we can test and still provide opportunities for a student to make up that exam if they miss, but yet get the most instructional time in. So that's really where we're at this year. We have a very good plan for that. So we're happy with how that's going, and hopefully we'll see the results of that. And again, that's comparing when other districts test their kids in PM3 versus when we were testing our kids in ELA with still 3 weeks to go in the last 9 weeks, right? That doesn't make a lot of sense.
Well, I appreciate the growing trend. You guys are the educators, but I think there's a remarkable downturn on SAT and those final score when they're tested. And we keep limiting the amount of tests kids have to take that are high stakes. And then when they come to the major one, when the time comes, it seems like a large number of them struggle with huge numbers as far as their academic scores. I don't know that we're continuing to do them favors by limiting the amount of tests they have to take. I understand the extra instructional time, and I appreciate that. But if they're going to continue that particular exam as a major portion for entrance, I'm not sure we're not defeating the purpose here.
Yeah, I think if you have to be careful looking at the research though, because if you look at the research, while the scores seem to be declining, the numbers of students taking those tests are increasing. So it's kind of offsetting. Are we, to our portrait of a graduate, do we have the right kids going in the right directions and understanding what that means? So those conversations start really early, especially at the high school level, that if you believe that you want to go to college as your choice, then what is it that you need to prepare for that exam, right? We all bought the big thick books that we went through, which you no longer have
Well,
to
Kaplan.
do. Yeah, right? So, there's a lot of pieces into what you said, but I understand.
I share Bob's concern. So let me ask you a question, because I'm looking at this. So basically, if you are in middle school, it's possible that you may never have a midterm or final exam in some courses.
Yes, if you're saying from middle school to high school?
Well, this in middle school
In
here,
middle school, we will not,
it's
that is
optional for
correct.
the teacher. So some classes, they may not take a midterm or a final.
that is
And
correct.
my concern with that is I think we can all acknowledge that, not just here, but across the country, we have had grade inflation. And the reason is because when eliminating these tests, frankly, because the other grades that you are taking is really, the other components now, the 50-50 grade, is really, did you show up, did you do your homework? If you show up and you do your homework, you're gonna get an A. That's really not a measure, have you mastered the material? The test is what determines if you've mastered the material, which is why now, like when kids apply to college, they don't even look really at your grades anymore because everybody has like a 4.8 GPA, and that's why things like the SAT are so important, because that's the only thing that is a true measure. The advanced placement exams, that's a true measure. But your GPA in high school now is not a measure of whether you've mastered the material.
Yeah, I'm gonna push back on that a little bit. We do curriculum maps, which we push out in every subject area. And within every subject area, we have benchmarks and standards within those that we will test on a weekly basis. And we will do common assessments at the 9-week mark, at the 18-week mark, at the 36-week mark. You know what I'm
So
saying?
you are testing that, because my first question was,
In the tested areas, we are testing that.
So
In
the
the
core
tested areas.
subjects are
it's just not
still-
called a midterm or a final?
That's correct.
Okay,
That's
well,
correct.
thanks for clarifying.
Yes, not a problem, not a problem.
It's the core subjects, but,
It is.
so my comment to that is, as a former middle school principal, if I would have known we had an argument to not do that, I would have had that argument long time ago,
Right.
because it does interrupt instructional time. And I totally get the, the accountability and stuff like that, but when it comes to the non-core subjects or the non-EOCs, I see the value to this, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, and so, yes, to answer your question, in those core subject areas, the LA math, the sciences, the social studies that we really know lead, that the state's gonna test on, that the students need to know, there will be 9-week benchmarks that we then get the results as a district, we review over the schools, we can get it down to the teacher level to see, if kids are staying on pace. But we'll produce those tests for every single week that teachers can
And that's
use.
part
We
of their
just don't
grade.
collect that.
Yeah, and I think it's
And that
important.
test, well, let me just ask one more question. That test, how they do on that test factors into their grade?
Yes, that is a
Okay.
graded exam. That is a graded
And I just
test.
want to point out too, midterms and final exams as a teacher, those are teacher-created tests. So I'm deciding what I'm testing my kid on versus what he is saying. That is a district-created test. That's probably a better assessment of where all of our kids are versus if I just want my kids to all get an A on the test, I can make any test I want that they can all get an A on. So
Yeah,
So
and
just
we
taking
saw
away midterms
variability
doesn't- right.
in how tests were produced and how long kids were asked to take a test and all of that. So by us taking that over in the tested areas, we know that we control that narrative a little bit more, and then we can, then we'll correlate it to the state exam or the state PM3 as well, so that we are covering, those are standards benchmark tests. That's what they are.
Same concerns. I'm
Sure.
not sure that if you can score something as a 6-week or a 9-week, that means you got it for 18-week and you've retained it for that length of time. My same concern is that final exam is supposed to register the knowledge gained throughout an entire period, not short-term snapshots of what was learned. Have you gathered what you were supposed to gather? Have you assimilated it? And are you able to tell me you've assimilated? That's what I'm looking for in a midterm or a
Sure.
final examination, where I think it expresses a broader depth of the knowledge of the material than those short snapshots you're talking about, Bob.
I would hope that we would collect that. The PM3 should be that, right? So if we saw that kids were producing well at PM3, but yet not producing well in the SAT, ACT, now that's a whole different conversation. But the PM3 in and of itself, which is the benchmark standards exam for the entire year for a student, that's where we're going to see that result of that accumulated knowledge throughout the year. So, all right, so that was.
Definitely a shift, but
Oh, it's a
Yeah.
shift, yes, and again, while we put it in here now, we're going to do this, other districts, we need to gather the time, do we see an increase in our scores because we've gathered instructional time, is the instructional time being used properly by the teachers, by the schools, right? There's a lot of moving parts still that we need to collect, but at this point, we believe kind of pushing that longer instructional time will allow our teachers just more time with their kids. So there's that one, and then the other one was the academic honors, which is at the bottom. Again, we clarified that all of the valedictorian, salutatorian, the summa magna, and cum laude are after the 8th semester and after all school scores have been reported. And while it's not much of a change, it's just a little bit more direct on what it is. We need to obviously make sure that our schools understand it as well before they hand down a valedictorian or salutatorian or summa magna. So, yeah, so that was the other one. And then the grade 8 promotion on there, which is the 4th one down. Really what we said was, if we had a rule that was, if you were like a half a semester short of finishing middle school, then we would promote you to the high school, and you would do the work there to make up for that half semester, but still be in your cohort group. What we found, kids were not going to summer school and taking advantage of that, and we said, no, that's not gonna work. We expect you to go to summer school to work, to try to get done with that half semester class, and then you can be with your cohort group. So, and it's a slippery slope. Keeping kids out of their cohort group for a credit or two is difficult, right? Because now they're going to be behind in high school. So we're trying to find a balance there, and this was the next piece of that, which is we expect you to come to summer school for at least half the time to work through what you have missed at middle school level. So
Right,
that is it. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks, Bob.
thank you. All right, next on the agenda is the budget. Mr. Marcus Allen.
Morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
All right, so obviously we have our budget, our tentative budget hearing tonight, so this is kind of a little preview of what's in that. You know, as we kind of look at our landscape going forward for next year. I never turn it on, just gotta remember that, so.
So I get the first slide, and I'll take just a few minutes here. I want to thank Marcus and his team. But really, it's, I mean, his team certainly did the heavy lifting. This is a document that we have been preparing for since back in the first semester. We started working on this early last school year. You know, we have 4 priority areas. They're all important. They all work together. Priority area 4, when it comes to resource allocation, how important is that? We know our dollars are finite. So where we choose to invest in our schools and our employees, our staff development, so that we can maximize our achievement, that's the heavy lift that we collectively work throughout the course of the year. So what you're gonna see Mr. Allen present here is a summation of months of collective conversations where we built a budget we believe will maximize success for the upcoming school year and still stay within the parameters set forth by the school board. So with that, Mr. Allen, I turn it back over to you.
All right. So as I mentioned before, the tentative hearing is tonight at 5:30 in this room here. First, we'll talk about the general fund. So looking at the 26-27 we have to look a little bit at what we're expecting to end it on. So last year, we projected to use 11.7 million of our fund balance for 25-26 fiscal year. We actually ended the year using about 7.3 million of that. So significantly less than we had originally planned. This upcoming year, the 26-27, we're expecting to use about 4.9 million of the fund balance. So last year, we're ending about 4.4 million better than we anticipated. So we're entering this 26-27 year at a 12.6% unassigned fund balance. Again, we're projecting a 10.1% unassigned fund balance for June of 27. Overall, general fund expenditures were reduced by about $8 million compared to expenditures last year. But we're continue to be impacted by the funding growth that we're seeing in the FEFP is not reaching our traditional schools. Again, the higher scholarship deductions, they're offsetting the gross FEFP increase. Traditional school enrollment continues to be pretty flat. And then I just want to note that approximately 37 million of our general fund budget is from the referendum as well. So looking at our federal programs, so you can see kind of where we had some reductions this year. We also had a couple of the federal programs that were increased. But kind of to sum it all together, we're looking at an overall reduction in federal funding of about $143,000. And if you remember last year, we had an overall reduction of about $500,000 just in Title I. It was about $750,000 overall last year. So when you add that together, you know, we have to be selective in what different things we're kind of funding. Looking at the scholarships specifically, so DOE provides the numbers that we have to use in the fall. If you remember last year's budget, we were estimated by DOE at 15.4 million for scholarships. We actually had 16.3 million withheld in scholarships. But as part of the budgeting process, I did put an assignment of about $1 million for additional scholarships, so it was expected and budgeted for all along. 26-27, we're using the number $19 million. That's what they've provided for us for scholarships again. You'll see later that again, we're going to be putting some additional restrictions in there just in case that number continues to grow. So as you can see, that's a $2.7 million increase in scholarships over 25-26. Our gross FEFP increase was about $3 million. So that only leaves us about $300,000 in actual increases. So all of the gross increases were really attributed towards scholarships. So some of the things that we've, we talked about, the fund balance remains well above the statutory requirements. That's something that was imposed by the school board, and we've done a good job in maintaining that. So we're in really good financial health. The 25-26 budget, we're expected to end better than originally budgeted. We've reduced quite a few operating costs, as you saw before. And then we're looking at the way we did that is by reducing those recurring expenditures of about $8 million. If you look from a staffing perspective, the final allocations in the 25-26 school year versus the 26-27 school year, overall, we're looking at a reduction in general fund positions of about 40 from what we ended at on June 30th. So this is broken down by function. These are reporting metrics that we report to the state. So most of them kind of align, most of them align, but not. It's not a one-for-one alignment for what you might think they are. Broken down by object, you can see administrators fall in category, teachers, other certified instructional personnel, paras, other support members, and then the school board. So looking at the different staff types, about 62 or 65% of all of our staff are directly in front of students. So that's teachers, certified instructional personnel, paras. 30.6% is that other support personnel. Those are going to be bus drivers, other types of aides, cafeteria workers, maintenance, custodians, things like that. So looking through all of our funds, we can see that the budget itself is about $559 million total. 47% of that budget really lies in our general or operating funds, 30% in our capital fund. I did want to make a note about the debt service fund. So this is the last year that we'll have a debt service on our books. So we can see that fund of $65 million is not outstanding debt. It's basically a long-term loan that the last payment's the balloon payment of it. So that's actually a fund balance sitting there. In May, we'll make that last payment. So that'll be completely off of next year's. So that'll be pretty exciting not to have any debt service.
We won't be making any money off that money.
That's true. We are making a decent amount of income, which has helped offsetting the recurring expenditures that we've had to make those payments. So we've been pretty fortunate on that front too. Broken down by revenue source, you can see that primarily it is local revenue. About 88% total of our funding district-wide comes from local sources. To dive a little bit into the general fund, I just mentioned 88% of our funding is local sources. So we have local sources at 81% and then transfers in at 6.7%. So that's going to be like reimbursement from some maintenance personnel, bus driver salaries, those things like that. Now we kind of get into the enrollment. Obviously everything is funded by the FEFP model. If we look at our enrollment trend from 25-26 to 26-27, it shows us increasing enrollment by 178 students. It shows the increase of scholarships by 255 students. We're showing a decrease in charter schools. That's just lagging data that we have to use. We don't believe that there's an increase or there's a decrease in charter schools. We have their data, so we can see that there's not really a decrease there, but the state's about a year and a half-ish behind on there. They just opened additional classrooms at Babcock, so, but this is what we have to show. So it does show a small reduction there. Also lagging behind is the virtual school. You can see that there was a large increase of last year, about 317 FTE. Originally projected last year was about 135 from the state, so that data is lagging, but this is trued up to what we ended the year at. And then you can see the traditional students are really only 14 increasing, so it's relatively flat. I do think we're on target for the traditional increase, but I would expect more to be going to charter schools. And I would expect that the scholarships remain pretty consistent as well. So part of the funding formula is the base student allocation. So you've all heard that the base student allocation increased by $85 per student. So the different program categories, you can see what kind of the impact is there. For K-3, there is an increase of $88 a student. 4 through 8 is the base level, so it is the $85. 9 through 12, 45-ish. ESOL is getting an increase, but both the level 4 and level 5 ESE programs are getting another decrease. So that'll be the second year in a row. And as we know that most of the level 4 and 5 students that they are at our Charlotte Harbor Center, so they do require the specialized care that it's more expensive, so that's why they fund it a little bit higher. CTE is getting a decent bump. They're actually receiving the highest increase out of all of our categories.
What kind of effect is that gonna have on Charlotte Harbor?
So nothing for the students, right? You know, we're still required to provide you know, the resources that are necessary to educate those students. But it just makes it a little bit more challenging because we have less dollars to work with. So where we might have been able to do another program or something else elsewhere in the district, we have to kind of redirect funds, you know, and over to there instead. Over here, this is kind of where you get the weighting. So at the end of the day, we'll be paid this base student allocation of 54, 57. multiplied by your 19,638. That's how they come up with the weighting. So that's all broken down, but I just condense it into one graph there. So that's where we get our base student allocation totals for our regular funding. So we can see over time the historical funding. There's a big jump in year 23, from year 23 to 24. And that was when they eliminated the categoricals and made it part of the base student allocation. But this is the first year in the last couple of years where the state funding actually is outpacing the local funding per dollar. Again, a lot of that is attributed towards the scholarships, but that's how the math breaks down. As part of that, this is the first year where the state is technically kicking in more than the local percentage. It outpaced it again. So we're just above 77% of our total general fund coming from local sources for FEFP. Broken down just on a macro level, we can see that the salaries and benefits continue to be the bulk of our expenditures. Purchase services, I like to remind everybody that purchase services include payments to charter schools as well as contractors for ESE. So that's the majority of those purchase services that you see there. Energy really is only about 2.5% or so. Materials and supplies, capital outlay are pretty small little chunks of the total picture. Broken down by function, again, as it should be, most of it is going to be instruction. Just about 2/3 of it is instruction. Some of the things got cut off there. So, but instructional support, that's going to be about 2/3 of our budget. And then just broken down by location, we have the most elementary schools. It makes sense that they're the most of our expenditures. Special allocations is where we put in all of our utilities and those types of services, since they kind of get spread out throughout different locations. Charter schools they do account for about 10% of our budget. They do account for about 10% of our students. So that math works out pretty well as well. I did want to point out, since Wendy, you asked that question, center schools, right? There's 2 center schools, but they're 7% of our budget. That primarily comes from the Charlotte Harbor Center because, that is our neediest group, and that's where the largest chunk of our ESE population is. So there is a lot more dollars that go to those 2 schools versus, the rest of them. Looking at the referendum, I mentioned before, we're looking at about $37 million budget for the property taxes for the referendum for this upcoming year. You can see that our budgeted numbers for last year are still, they're still called budget because we haven't finished last year yet, but we're on track to have some dollars to roll forward into this year yet. But you can kind of see that the majority of it is competitive salaries and benefits, and then other quality initiatives such as coaches and security, things like that. We talked about this at the beginning. Last year, initially, we had planned on $11.7 million of deficit spending. We're looking at about $7.4 million ending the year, so a little bit better than we had anticipated. We are planning on dipping into reserves a little bit, of just under $5 million this year. But again, that puts us right at the 10% unassigned fund balance. So we're still in a healthy spot. For the capital fund, I just wanted to point out this chart. We saw several years of large growth in property values in Charlotte County. This will be our smallest growth year. It's about 0.1% in property value change that we're seeing this year. So last year we collected about $55.4 million, and we're collecting 55.7-ish, or anticipating to collect that for next year. Along that line, you can see some of our capital expenditures and our appropriations are being reduced, anticipation of that, but also because we finished a lot of projects last year. So we had quite a few projects like the aviation hangar, the one at the airport as well. We had some property acquisition, those types of things that we're not doing this year. So the appropriations are a little bit less. Once again, tentative budgets hearings tonight. Other than that, did you guys have any questions or?
No question, great job. I mean,
Well,
it's
looks
every year
tight.
is a different, it's a
Trying.
different challenge.
We're trying. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Marcus.
Is it the same presentation this evening?
No,
A little different?
that one's a little longer.
Extended?
It's extended, there's more things I have to say.
Thank you.
All right, any district updates? All right, Baker Policy
No
Council.
update there?
All right, tentative workshop, we need one?
No, I don't think so.
No. All right, I just want to say, this is Kim's last workshop.
That's true.
No one's are crying now.
You'll see that for tonight.
You're gonna miss your short workshops.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, turning it back over to
All right,
Ms.
thank you, Vice Chair Atkinson. With no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.